So good afternoon, everyone. This is Audrey Russo. Thrilled to be here. I never know what day it is anymore, but Jonathan keeps me straight. I'm joined here by Jonathan Kirsting, Vice President of all things media and marketing at the Tech Council. And today is Thursday, right, Jonathan?
Yes, all day long.
All day long. Okay. So we're pretty excited about today's guest. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on a topic that's probably near and dear to many of us, but we're going to let Teresa Whalen sort of lead the way. So I want to give thanks to Huntington Bank. They have been amazing partners right from the onset, and they also are amazing partners to businesses in the community, whether it's pandemic or not. You can count on them to be helpful. But the leadership is heavily involved in the region's civic issues, and we are thrilled to partner with them. So we're on our day number 142. I think these guys are trying to keep track. 142 business as usuals, with the intent of making sure that we're keeping the tech community connected and making sure that everything that's happening in the community, that we can continue to be connected. And that includes business development, and be cognizant about companies and to understand where the gaps are, and also all the things that sort of set the table for the world that we're living in right now. Today is no different. We have muted your microphones just to be considerate, and we also have opportunities for chat. Jonathan is going to be paying attention to that so that we can have an opportunity to ask some questions of our guest. And with that note, I am very thrilled to just jump in and introduce Teresa Whalen. She is now the CEO of a Pittsburgh-based company called CytoAgents. And what we're going to do is just say, hey, Teresa, how are you? And who is Teresa? A little bit about your journey that led you up to what you're doing today. So thank you for taking the time. I know you're very busy.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about myself. I am a pharmacist by background, graduated right here from the University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy. And I spent partially of my career, I did practice as a hospital pharmacist, but spent the vast majority in industry, spanning multiple sectors across healthcare. 10 years at Siemens Medical and Healthcare Information. I spent some time at a robotics company. I developed and patented algorithm for the specialty medicine industry. And this is, I'm also an investor in the Next Act Fund and Blue Tree. And so this is my second CEO position, and I came to it through my contacts at Blue Tree. So Catherine Mott recruited me about 2 years ago to take over CytoAgents, and here we are.
Was it always called CytoAgents? Was the company always called CytoAgents?
Previously it was called Gemis Pharma. And so Blue Tree was one of the majority shareholders in Gemis, and that's how we became aware of that and acquired the assets of this company and recapitalized a new company and build a brand new team.
So Catherine Mott, just in full disclosure, she's a member of our board, and she's the founder of Blue Tree Angels. She's very active, excuse me, in the angel community, and she as well uses her civic muscle to make sure that the innovation economy really thrives. So you're lucky, and on both fronts, as an investor, as a friend.
Yeah, she's been an incredible supporter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's an incredible supporter of the company. She also sits on our board. That's as Blue Tree is our lead investor. Mm-hmm.
So but here's the thing. Let's just sort of backpedal a little bit. You know, you said you're a pharmacist, you're an investor, you're an entrepreneur, you're an active angel investor, and now you're at the helm of another company. So how did you go? Like, pharmacists and sometimes entrepreneurs don't necessarily align into what you're doing right now. So what is it about you that didn't fit into any of these molds?
Yeah, I probably should have gone to medical school in hindsight. I knew I wanted to pursue, you know, not that there's anything wrong with being a pharmacist. I love being a pharmacist, and that foundation has served me so well. Mm-hmm. But I think what I learned at Pitt and that's carried me through my life is that you never stop learning. And they always said to us, we're here to teach you to think and to problem solve. And I think that is really what's at the core of my spirit, is looking at problems and coming up with solutions. And I like to be stimulated with new problems. So I've taken a lot of chances and venturing into new endeavors.
That's great. That's really great. So talk about CytoAgents now. Sort of talk about the evolution. Talk about the work you're doing. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive.
Sure.
And what's
CytoAgents.
the website? What's the website? CytoAgents.
www.cytoagents.com, CYTOAGE, cytoagents.com. And CytoAgents is a clinical stage biotech company developing a drug to radically change how we treat a condition known as cytokine storm. And cytokine storm is becoming more and more common, I think, given what's going on with COVID. What cytokine storm is it's an overreaction of your immune system. It causes overwhelming inflammation and respiratory distress. And specifically in COVID, it is shown to be what's causing patients to progress from mild to severe illness. It's what's causing patients to go into the ICU, require ventilation. It's an overwhelming respiratory distress response that's causing more harm than the virus itself. So that's our initial focus, but there are many causes of cytokine storm. So our mission is to develop a long-lasting treatment for many causes of cytokine storm, COVID being the most urgently needed, and we're going to address that first and then expand our pipeline.
So it's so interesting that most people had never heard of cytokine storm until COVID. So it's almost like, I mean, I don't want to say like you're at the right place at the right time and now it's a common vocabulary, but even myself, I'd never heard of that. So what other conditions sort of align to that cytokine storm?
Well, the company was initially focused on influenza, which is still an incredible public health problem. So we know there's a strong cytokine storm in influenza, and that is what enabled us, because of how we've mapped our science, to be able to pivot to COVID-19. But we also know that conditions like vaping-induced lung damage, we are working with Tulane, which is a leading academic center for this type of research. And they are getting ready to publish a paper that shows that vaping-induced cytokine storm is the strongest cytokine storm they've ever seen in their research, and it causes far greater damage than cigarette smoking. So we're working on that in parallel. And then there's things such as CAR T-cell therapy, which is very big in oncology in the treatment of cancers. And CAR T-cell, the whole point of CAR T-cell therapy is to rev up your immune system to fight the cancer. But sometimes that becomes a bit of a runaway train, and you need to calm that storm down a bit. So that, and then there's many others, rheumatoid arthritis, traumatic brain injury. There's many others.
So this word storm, this is a common word that's used in terms of, because we're throwing it around.
Yeah, I would say the medical community would refer to it as cytokine release syndrome. That's the accurate medical term. But in lay language, it's well referred to now as cytokine storm.
Well, so talk about the vaping. What's when you say vaping, you're talking about cigarette vaping, marijuana vaping, or just all?
Vaping, generally speaking, tends to deposit things more deeply in our lungs. And, in certain cases will cause this overwhelming response.
Wow. So it's exciting times for you, I would imagine. Are you feeling like this is more exciting than normal as you got into this, or do you feel like this is just in alignment with what the hypothesis was in terms of the creation of the company?
Well, it certainly is in alignment with the hypothesis of the company. We knew from the beginning we had this potential. What COVID and the emergency circumstances has allowed us to do is accelerate to proof of concept. So we have the opportunity under an emergency situation and under FDA guidance that we can do a little bit more in parallel. So we can accelerate to proof of concept. And our goal would be to fast track to widespread treatment availability towards the end of next year.
So with all these opportunities and all this focus, what's the configuration of your team right now?
So we balance capital efficiency with domain expertise. So we have 4 employees, key employees, myself, our Chief Science Officer, Jody Crago, who's a PhD out of the University of Pittsburgh. She was there for 20 years in the Vaccine Research Center. And then we have our Chief Medical Officer, Todd Lorenz, who's a physician, and he is in California. He is a world-renowned expert in drug development. He has experience running global trials with hundreds of sites and thousands of patients, bringing the drugs to the market. So, I was able to recruit these really high caliber team members because they believe in the science. They looked at the science and said, every clinician looks at the science and says, wow, this has promise and we want to be a part of this. So those are our employees, but then we have key consultants and we have a arrangement with a key consulting firm out in California that helps us manage regulatory, toxicology, statisticians, all the domain expertise that is required for drug development. And we don't have to hire them. We have the luxury of tremendous bench strength, and we just plug and play them when we need them.
That's really incredible. That's incredible.
We really try to funnel every dollar to our R&D and limit our spend on overhead.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. So that means maybe someone like myself could get into this business, right?
Sure.
You've orchestrated sort of a strategy. I'm just joking. You have an impeccable background that lines up to this. But I really like hearing about that because you're really strategizing and not necessarily doing all the operating. And there's a lot to navigate. There's a lot to navigate. So there's much work going on right now, right? In terms of vaccine development, we've seen some hiatuses recently. We have Moderna vaccine trials that are going on here in Pittsburgh. But long after, the vaccine is released, can you talk about the role of therapeutics just in terms of COVID?
Yeah, we see, and I think there's consensus that the ultimate solution is going to be a combination approach. Vaccines and testing are key for prevention and tracing. But then there's the category of, there's going to be an ongoing need for treatment. And there's essentially 2 broad categories of treatment types. One is the antiviral treatment type, and then the other is the drugs, the immunotherapy drugs that deal with the cytokine storm. We have data that shows that we make antivirals better. So our data showed that when given alone, there's 60% survival, but when you combine it with an antiviral, in the influenza case, a Tamiflu, in the COVID case, perhaps remdesivir, that we would actually make those drugs work better. So ideally for the patient, the antiviral is going to reduce the viral load, and then we're going to plug in an immunotherapy to ensure that the immune system's not overreacting. And so we play in the immunotherapy space. And then within that space, there are a lot of biologicals that you hear about. If you ever hear IL-6 reducer is a big one that's in the news a lot. A lot of those are biologics, and while they may work, they have pretty significant side effect profiles. They're extremely expensive. They require refrigeration. The manufacturing is complicated. And so where our differentiation comes in is that we know that we can calm the cytokine storm. Our safety profile's better. It's an oral drug. It's a small molecule drug. It does not require refrigeration. And it has shelf stability for over 3 years. So we see it importantly as a stockpiling candidate.
And so are you seeing the changes in terms of treatment over these last 7 months?
Yes, yes. So, I mean, we are learning in real time.
Right.
And, you know, as the trials get bigger, we are confident in the safety of what's being tested, and the fact that it's working is statistically real. So we're learning in real time, and it does ebb and flow. What seems promising, does it, you know, continue to be promising? Do side effects pop up? I mean, it's very normal to see stoppages in trials. We saw one in the AstraZeneca trial. They've restarted. We saw 2 this week. That's part of the process. You just have to do some root cause analysis, and then you determine whether or not you move forward.
So before we jump to a couple of the questions in there, so with the announcement of this phase 1 launch, right, you'll be one of the first. We actually will be the first, is that correct, on safety? But can you walk us through the various phases? I think that's really important for people to understand, and what you seek to accomplish at each of these phases, because it's complex, it's timely, and it's hard to rush through.
Yes. So to put in why this is such an important milestone for CytoAgents is to put it into context, to get authorization to move into a phase 1 human trial. For every 50,000 drugs that are discovered in the lab, only 5 make it to where we're at. Mm-hmm. And then what happens from here, when you've been cleared to go into a phase 1 clinical trial, every phase builds on itself. So phase 1 is typically 20 to 100 patients requiring months, and they're healthy volunteers. Mm-hmm. And we study side effects, the safety of the drug, and what would be the ideal dose to take into your phase 2 trial. And then about 70% of drugs in phase 1 get cleared to go into phase 2. And in phase 2, you're talking about hundreds of patients, months to 2 years to complete, depending on the indication. And you expand what you look at from a safety standpoint, but you also begin to study, does the drug work? You study efficacy of the drug. And then 30% of the drugs clear phase 2 and go into phase 3. And that typically takes thousands of patients. You expand your safety, you expand, you become more statistically sound that the drug works the way you think it works. And again, about 30%, and that could take years as well, depending on the indication. And then 30% of those move on to the new drug application and commercialization. But along the way, there are opportunities to fast track. FDA has always had a fast track, and you see it largely in areas of tremendous need. And that's been the traditional use of the fast track. So oncology is used a lot, infectious disease uses it a lot. But then what's unprecedented really is in COVID-19, they've enacted the emergency use authorization pathway, which again, allows us to get to widespread treatment availability more quickly, but it's still done in a very safe, scientifically sound way.
Okay, so I'm going to just ask one question, then I'm going to ask Jonathan to take up these other questions. And going back real quickly on the cytokine storm, if you look back at 1918 in the flu,
Yeah.
in that, I mean, everything that was going on there and the lives that were lost, they were young people. Were they mostly young people, and was it a result of this storm that we lost so many people in 1918?
Well, in a typical flu season, the mortality curve is a U. And so it's mostly the very young and the very elderly.
Okay.
But every once in a while, and generally speaking, in a pandemic, the curve becomes more of a W, where you have young people, middle-aged people, and older people that have spikes in mortality. And that's what's beginning to emerge in this pandemic. And, you know, the pandemic also of 1918 also had what was more significant in that was the second wave, which is starting to be discussed now. The second wave was actually more deadly than the initial outbreak.
Oh, really? In the Spanish flu, it was? Okay. In 1918. Okay. So you think we're approaching that as well?
I don't know. You know, again, we're learning in real time.
Right.
COVID-19 is a different virus family than influenza is. It's a coronavirus. You know, so we have less experience with it. And again, I wish I could predict the future, but
yeah, well, I thought I had you at my disposal, and I wanted to see if you could get anything from it. So let Jonathan, there's a couple of questions in here that I would like asked of you. So let Jonathan just read them quickly, and then we can get, you know, to you.
Two great questions here, Teresa, and thanks for being with us here today. First question, has COVID-19 diverted resources or attention that may have been directed towards your work regarding influenza, or is what you may be learning applicable with regards to other viral infectious diseases as well?
Yeah, it's very applicable. So we're not sacrificing one for the other. We've just reprioritized and sequenced them differently. But the COVID program is relevant to our influenza and other infectious disease programs.
Interesting. And then from Dirk Kalp here basically wants to know, does your work also explore the nutritional approach in combination with the pharmacology?
We're focused on our drug development. You know, we have to hone in on that ourselves. But, you know, I don't know that this is what was meant by the question, but we do study food effect on the drug. And we do know that, you know, what the food effect is on our drug. But from a nutritional standpoint itself, strictly speaking, that's a bit out of the scope of what we're doing.
Excellent.
Okay, great. So how can, I mean, we're very proud, obviously. We're proud of you. We're proud of this work right here. Can you talk about what it takes to fund this kind of work in this initiative, and, you know, and the various sources of investments and grants that are powering you?
Yeah, so we take a multi-pronged approach where we certainly pursue any non-dilutive grant opportunity that we find. And we have an incredible grant writing consulting firm that does everything on contingency.
That's great.
So we were awarded a $1.6 million grant in May, and we're able to apply for a supplement of equal value. And as well, we've submitted a $3 million grant that was scored even better by the NIH for COVID-related work. So we're really excited about that. And then we're pursuing with NIH also our vaping and our sepsis models. So that's the non-dilutive work stream, if you will.
Right.
We have been incredibly successful with the angel community. Typically, even to run a phase 1 trial, you have to go to venture in drug development. But we have secured enough funding that we are conducting our phase 1 trial through the investment of the angel community. And that allows us to really position the company in a way that is ideal for a Series A round. So we're going to be able to de-risk the safety and increase the value and raise our Series A as a phase 2 ready company. And we're starting that process as we speak. We want to keep the momentum going. We need to secure this fundraising, and we need to do it by early next year to keep our phase 2 trials on track. So we're actively working with the investor community and looking for people who have an interest in drug development, understand the risk profile, but understand there's tremendous upside, and that our company has already demonstrated that we've reduced the investment risk, and we have far exceeded the typical value that you would see in a Series A.
I think it's really remarkable. In all my years being in Pittsburgh, that's really remarkable. And so, any local foundation support? Have you had any support from the foundations or any in helping you?
Yeah, this summer, as part of their pandemic response, the R.K. Mellon Foundation invested $250,000 into the company. Wow. So that was incredibly meaningful to us and helped get us over the finish line to funding that phase 1 trial.
That's great. So if people are interested in investing, can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, because your model is very, very different than what we've seen. So this whole verbiage that you're talking about, de-risking and doing some of this at the earliest stage, is really fantastic. And it is actually pivotal and different in terms of what we've seen. So my hat's off to you to being so creative and intentional. Are you hiring?
Before we leave that point, I do want to emphasize, in order to keep the momentum going, yes, if anybody out there wants to invest as an individual, that please feel free to contact me. But additionally, if anybody in the audience has connections to the VC world and could provide an introduction, that would be also extremely meaningful.
Do we have time for one last question, Audrey?
Yes.
So the next key hire, is that what you wanted me to?
We have another question for you here that came in from Joe Visk. He says, Pittsburgh has seen over the years a number of organizations that show promise and draws interest from larger organizations, causing them to leave Pittsburgh for bigger biotech pharma markets. Two questions here. Is the long-term plan an acquisition for you guys, or do you foresee Pittsburgh being the long-term home for CytoAgents?
Typically, to run phase 3 trials, you do need strategic pharma backing, because again, those are trials of thousands of patients. So we certainly do see an acquisition, but it may take the form of a variety of structures. We could license the COVID-19 drug while we still pursue other indications, or we could be acquired in its entirety. It's really, we aren't there yet, but our expectation is as soon as we establish proof of concept in our COVID-19 phase 2 trial by the end of next year, that will lead us to fast track widespread availability, and that will attract a strategic investor.
Okay, so I cut you off and you circled back. So the last question is, are you hiring? And is there anything that you would like to ask us as a tech community to be supportive of your work?
Our next key hire is going to be a VP of business development to really hone in on the likely strategic investor who establishing and further developing the relations that we have in the big pharma world. But we do need to start expanding those relationships so that when we do show proof of concept, we're ready and they're behind us.
Okay. Well, we are cheering for you. I can tell you that we are very, very excited. These are difficult problems, and these are life-threatening problems, and they're They're hampering our economic performance as well as the way we live and work. And so hats off to you for being here and being an entrepreneur as well as a scientist, and taking a risk as well as understanding the de-risking components that make the investment in your company and your work even more attractive. Yeah. So we go to CytoAgents. That's how you can find her. And as you can tell, she's pretty busy, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time with us today. And
opportunity. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And Jonathan, who's on board for wrapping up the week?
Our friends at Neighborhood Allies are stopping by tomorrow to talk about the 2020 Healthy Neighborhood Awards, which we're doing a full podcast series on. Some amazing, amazing winners this year. People just doing great work in their neighborhoods, from feeding kids to STEM stuff to helping people build some wealth. Great stuff. Can't wait to talk more about it tomorrow.
That's great. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you
everyone for joining us today. Stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you.